Hi everybody! Welcome to another Storytime with Sid. It's me, Sidney of Hightower. Welcome if we have never met before, and if we have, welcome back. It's good to see you. I know I can't physically see you, but it feels like I can. I feel like I know you already if we've been with me for a while. So, welcome and enjoy another story with me, Sid, Sidney of Hightower. Well, so the story that I picked for today is one that I think I've seen a lot of in a lot of different adaptations in human culture. It's called The Ugly Duckling, and I think it's a really cute story, and I think it has a really good moral and is important for everybody to hear. So if this is your first time hearing it, great, and if not, you're in for a real treat. Okay, let me see if I can find it. Yes! This is The Ugly Duckling. It was so lovely out in the country. It was summer. The rye was yellow, the oats green. They had been gathered in stacks down in the green meadows. That's where the stork was, walking around on his long red legs, speaking Egyptian because that was the language he had learned from his mother. Surrounding the fields and meadows were great forests, and in the middle of the forests were deep lakes. Oh yes, it was truly lovely out in the country. In the midst of the sunshine stood an old estate with a deep moat all around. From the walls and down to the water grew huge dock leaves that were too tall that little children could stand upright under, the largest of them. It was just as wild in there as in the thickest forest, and that's where a duck was sitting on her nest. She had to sit there to hatch her little ducklings, but now she was getting tired of it all because it was taking such a long time, and she rarely had visitors. The other ducks were fond of swimming around in the moat and running over to sit under a dock leaf to chat with her. Finally, one egg cracked open after the other. "Peep, peep," they all said, and the egg yolks have come alive and were sticking out their heads. "Quack, quack," she said, and they all rushed out as fast as they could and looked all around under the green leaves. Their mother let them look as much as they liked because green is good for the eyes. "How big the world is," said the youngsters, because now they had quite a bit more room than they were lying inside their eggs. "You think this is the whole world," said their mother. "It stretches far away to the other side of the garden, and all the way to their pastor's field, although I've never been that far. But you're all here now, aren't you?" And she got up. "No, I don't have all of you. The biggest egg is still lying there. How long is it going to take? I'm getting very tired of this." And then she sat down again. "So how's it going?" said an old duck who came to visit. "One egg is taking such a long time," said the duck on the nest. "It won't crack open. But look at the others. They're the loveliest ducklings I've ever seen. They all look like their father, that rogue who never comes to see me." Let me look at the egg that won't crack open," said the old duck. "I bet it's a turkey egg. I was once fooled like that myself, and I had my share of troubles with those youngsters because they're afraid of water. And let me tell you, I couldn't get them to go in. I quacked and snapped, but it did no good. Let me see that egg. It's a turkey egg, all right. Just leave it here and go teach the other children to swim." "I think I'll sit on it a little while longer," said the duck. "I've been sitting here this long, I might as well sit for the rest of the summer." "Be my guest," said the old duck, and then she left. Finally, the biggest egg cracked open. "Peep, peep," said the youngster and tumbled out. He was so big and hideous. The duck looked at him. "That's certainly an awfully big duckling," she said. "None of the others looked like that. He couldn't be a turkey chick, could he? Well, we shall soon see. Into the water he goes, even if I have to kick him in myself." The next day the weather was gloriously beautiful. The sun shone on all the green dock plants. The mother duck and her whole family went down to the moat. Splash! She jumped into the water. "Quack, quack," she said, and one duckling after the other plopped in. The water washed over their heads, but they popped up at once and floated around so beautifully. Their legs moved on their own, and all of them were in the water. Even the hideous gray youngster was swimming along. "No, he's not a turkey," she said. Look how beautifully he uses his legs and how erect he holds himself. That's my child. Actually, he's quite handsome if you take a good look. Quack, quack, come along with me, and I'll take you out into the world and introduce you to the duckyard. But stay close to me so that no one steps on you, and watch out for the cats. And then they went into the duckyard. There was a terrible ruckus going on because two families were fighting over an eel head, and that cat ended up getting it. See, that's how things go in the world, said the mother duck, licking her bill because she too would have liked to have that eel head. Use your legs now, she said. See if you can't hurry up and dip your necks into the old duck over there. She's the most refined of anyone here. She has Spanish blood, and that's why she's so fat. And see there, she's a red rag around her leg. That's a remarkably lovely thing, and the highest honor any duck can be given. She's so important that they won't get rid of her, and both animals and humans must respect her. Hurry up! Don't put your legs together. A well-mannered duckling keeps his legs far apart, just like father and mother. Come on, now dip your head and say quack! And that's what they did. But the other ducks standing around looked at them and said quite loudly, Look at this! Now we've got to deal with that bunch too, and if it weren't enough of us already. And ugh, just take a look at that duckling. We're not going to put up with him. And one of the ducks flew over and promptly bit him on the back of the neck. Leave him alone, said the mother. He's not hurting anyone. Yes, but he's big and too odd-looking, said the duck who had bitten him, so he's going to be pushed around. What a handsome children that mother has, said the old duck with the rag around her leg. All of them so handsome, except for one. That one certainly didn't turn out too well. I wish she could hatch that one over again. That's not possible, Your Grace, said the mother duck. He may not be handsome, but he has a genuinely good nature, and he swims as beautifully as any of the others. Yes, I'd venture to say, even a little better. And I think he'll be handsome when he grows up, or with time he might get a little smaller. He was too long in the egg, and that's why he isn't the right shape. Then she plucked at the back of his neck and smoothed out his feathers. Besides, he's a drake, she said, so it doesn't matter as much. I think he'll turn out to be strong, and I'm sure he'll win a place for himself. The other ducklings are so charming, said the old duck. Make yourselves at home, and if you happen to find an eelhead, you can bring it to me. And so they made themselves at home. But the poor duckling, who was the last to come out of his egg and looked so horrid, was bitten, shoved, and teased by both the ducks and the hens. He's too big, they all said. And the tom turkey, who was born with spurs which made him think he was the emperor, puffed himself up like a ship at full sail, walked over to him and started gobbling until he turned bright red in the face. The poor duckling had no idea which way to turn. He was very sad because he looked so hideous and was ridiculed by the whole duckyard. That really does get to a person. That's how it went on the first day, and afterwards it got worse and worse. The poor duckling was chased by everyone. Even his siblings were mean to him, and they always said, If only the cat would get you. What a horrible troublemaker you are. And his mother said, If only you were far away. The ducks bit him, and the hens pecked at him, and the maid, who was supposed to feed the animals, gave him a kick with her foot. Then he took off running and flew over the hedge. The little birds in the bushes darted up in the air out of fright. It's because I'm so hideous, he thought, and he closed his eyes, but still he kept on running. Then he reached the great marsh where the wild ducks lived. There he lay all night. He was so tired and sad. In the morning, the wild ducks flew up, and they looked at their new companion. Who on earth are you? They said. But that doesn't matter to us, provided you don't marry anyone in our family. The poor thing. He had no intention of getting married as long as he was allowed to sit among the reeds and drink a little marsh water. There he stayed for 2 whole days. Then 2 wild geese came along. Or rather 2 wild ganders, because they were males. It wasn't long ago that they had come out of their eggs, and that's why they were so brash. Listen here, my friend, they said. You're so hideous that we actually like you. Want to come along and be a migrating bird? Nearby in another marsh there are some heavenly sweet wild geese, all of them young ladies who would say quack. You're in a position to be a success because you're so hideous." Bang! Boom! They suddenly heard overhead. Both the wild geese fell dead in the reeds, and the water turned blood red. Bang! Boom! Was heard again, and the entire flock of wild geese rose up from the reeds. Then shots rang out again. A great hunt was underway. The hunters lay all around the marsh. Some were even up in the tree branches that stretched far out over the reeds. Blue smoke drifted like clouds among the dark trees and hovered far out over the water. Through the mud came the hunting dogs. Splash! Splash! Reeds and rushes swayed on all sides. What a horror it was for the poor duckling! He turned his head to tuck it under his wing, but just at that moment a huge, terrifying dog stopped right next to him, his long tongue hanging out of his mouth and his eyes shining horridly. He lowered his jaws towards the duckling, showed his sharp teeth, and splish, splish! He left without taking him. "Oh, thank God," said the duckling. "I'm so hideous that not even the dog wanted to bite me." And then he lay very still as the bullets whistled through the reeds, with not one shot exploding after the other. One shot exploding after the other. Not until late in the day was it quiet. The poor youngster still didn't dare stand up. He waited another few hours before he looked around, and then hurried away from the marsh as fast as he could, racing over field and meadow. There was a strong wind, so he had a hard time making headway. Toward evening, he reached a poor little farmhouse. It was so wretched that he couldn't make up his mind which way to fall, and that's why it was still standing. The wind was blowing so hard against the duckling that he had to sit on his tail and hold his ground, and it got worse and worse. Then he noticed that a dog. Oh, God. Then he noticed that the door, there we go, had come loose from its hinges and was hanging so crookedly that he could slip through the crack into the house. And that's what he did. Inside lived an old woman with her cat and her hen. The cat, who was called Sunny, could arch his back and purr. He could even throw off sparks, but for that you had to stroke his fur the wrong way. The hen had very short little legs, and that's why she was called Henny Shortlegs. She was good at laying eggs, and the woman was so fond of her as her own child. In the morning, they noticed the strange duckling. The cat started purring, and the hen began to cluck. "What's this?" said the woman, looking all around, but she couldn't see well. That's why she thought the duckling was a plump duck that had gone astray. "What a nice find," she said. "Now I can have duck eggs. If only it's not a drake. We'll have to give it a try." And so the duckling was accepted on a trial basis for 3 weeks. But no eggs appeared. Oops. The cat was the master of the house, and the hen was the mistress. They both kept on saying, "We," and the rest of the world, because they thought they were half of it, and the better half at that. The duckling thought it might be possible to have another opinion, but the hen wouldn't stand for it. "Can you lay eggs?" she asked. "No." "Well, then you better keep your mouth shut." And the cat said, "Can you arch your back and purr?" I'm going to try that again. "Can you arch your back and purr and throw sparks?" "No." "Well, then we don't want to hear from you when the sensible people are talking." And the duckling sat in the corner in a bad temper. Then he happened to think about the fresh air and sunshine. He had such a strange desire to float in the water, and at last he couldn't resist. He had to tell the hen. "What's come over you?" she asked. "You don't have anything to do, and that's why you get such ideas in your head. Lay eggs and purr, and then we'll pass you." "But it's so lovely to float on the water," said the duckling. "So lovely to dip your head under the water and dive down to the bottom." "Oh, that's a great pleasure, all right," said the hen. "You must be crazy. Ask the cat. He's the smartest one I know. Whether he likes floating on the water or diving underneath, I wouldn't even talk about myself. Or you can ask our mistress, the old woman. There's no one wiser in the whole wide world. Do you think she wants to float or get water on her head?" "You don't understand me," said the duckling. "Well, if we don't understand you, then who does? You'll never be smarter than the cat or the old woman, not to mention myself. Stop making a fuss, child, and thank your Creator for all the kindness that has been showed to you. Haven't you ended up in a warm house with companions that you can learn something from? But you're a fool, and it's not amusing to be around you. Believe me, it's for your own good that I'm telling you these unpleasant things. That's how you know where your true friends are. So see to it that you lay eggs and learn to purr and throw sparks. Definition of a bad friend. I think I'll go outside into the wide world, said the duckling. Well, go ahead, said the hen. And so the duckling left. He floated on the water, then dove down, but all the animals ignored him because he was ugly. Then autumn came, and the leaves in the forest turned brown and yellow, and the wind seized hold of them, so they danced around and the sky looked cold. The clouds hung heavy with hail and snowflakes, and on the fence stood a raven shrieking, "Ow, ow!" from sheer cold. Yes, you could end up freezing just by thinking about it. Things certainly weren't going well for the poor duckling. One evening, the sun was setting gloriously. A whole flock of lovely big birds came out of the thickets. The duckling had never seen anything so beautiful. They were dazzling white, with long, supple necks. They were swans. They were swans. They uttered quite a wondrous sound, spread out their magnificent long wings, and flew away from the cold regions to the warmer countries to open waters. They climbed so high, and the ugly duckling felt quite strange. He spun around in the water like a wheel, stretching his neck up high into the air after them, uttering a cry so loud and strange that it scared even him. Oh, he couldn't forget those lovely birds. Those happy birds. As soon as he lost sight of them, he dove straight down to the bottom, and when he came back up, he was practically beside himself. He didn't know what those birds were called, or even that they were flying, but he loved them as he had never loved anyone else. He didn't envy them in the least. How could he even think of wishing for such loveliness? He would have been happy if the ducks merely allowed him to stay among them, the poor ugly creature. And the winter was cold. So cold. The duckling had to swim around in the water to keep it from freezing over. But every night the hole in which he was swimming grew smaller and smaller. It froze so hard that the icy crust crackled. The duckling had to keep moving his legs in the water, or it would close up. At last he grew so weak that he lay quite still, and then was frozen into the ice. Early in the morning a farmer appeared. He saw the duckling, went out, smashed the ice to bits with his wooden clog, and carried the bird in home to his wife. There the duckling was revived. The children wanted to play with him, but the duckling thought they were trying to hurt him and flew in terror right to the milk basin till the milk splashed all over the room. The farmer's wife screamed and flapped her hands in the air. Then the duckling flew in through the butter and then the flour barrel and out again. What a sight he was! The farmer's wife screamed and swung at him with hearth tongs, and the children tumbled all over each other to catch the duckling. As they laughed and shrieked, it was a good thing the door stood open. Out he rushed into the bushes in the newly fallen snow. There he lay, as if in a daze. But it would be much too sad to recount all the suffering and the misery he had to endure that harsh winter. He was lying in the marsh along the rushes when the sunshine once again began to feel warm. The larks sang. It was lovely springtime. Then, all of a sudden, he lifted his wings. They flapped stronger than before and powerfully carried him away. And before he even knew it, he was in a great garden where the apple tree stood in bloom. There were lilacs that hung fragrantly in their long green bows all the way down to the winding waterways. Oh, it was so lovely there, so springtime fresh, and right in front of him, out of the thickets, came 3 lovely white swans. They ruffled their feathers and floated so lightly on the water. The duckling recognized the magnificent creatures and was stirred by a strange sadness. I'll fly over to them, those royal birds, and they'll peck me to death because someone like me, who is so hideous, dares to approach them. But it doesn't matter. Better to be killed by them, to be nipped by ducks, pecked by hens, or kicked by a maid who tends to the chicken coops, and to suffer so terribly all winter. And he flew out to the water and swam over to the magnificent swans. They saw him, came gliding towards them with ruffled feathers. "Go ahead and kill me," said the poor bird, and he bent his head down to the surface of the water and waited for death. But what did he see in the clear water? He saw beneath him his own image. And he was no longer a clumsy, grayish-black bird, horrid and hideous. He was a swan. It doesn't matter if you're born in a duckyard when you've been laying inside a swan's egg. He actually felt glad about all the suffering and hardships he had endured. Now he could appreciate his happiness and all the loveliness that awaited him. And the great swan swam all around him, stroking them with her bills. Several little children came into the garden. They threw bread and grain into the water, and the youngest of them cried, "There's a new one!" And the other children also shouted joyfully, "Yes, a new one has arrived!" And they clapped their hands and danced around. They ran to find father and mother. Bread cakes were tossed into the water, and they all said, "The new one is the most beautiful of all, so young and so lovely." And the old swans bowed to him. Then he felt quite bashful and tucked his head behind his wings. He didn't know what to make of it. He was much too happy, but not the least bit proud, because a good heart is never proud. He thought about how he had been badgered and scorned, and now he heard everyone say that he was the loveliest of all, the loveliest in the water. The lilacs dipped their boughs all the way down to him in the water, and the sun shone so warm and so fine. Then he ruffled his feathers, raised his slender neck, and rejoiced with all of his heart. "I never dreamed of so much happiness when I was the ugly duckling." And that is the story of the ugly duckling. I love that story. It's beautiful. Well, I think the moral is fairly clear, but you shouldn't base your self-worth on how you look. There's so much more to a living thing. There's so much more to a human, to a fae, to a duck. There's so much more than just what lays on the outside. And he's lucky that he was born good. And then he's even more grateful to grow up to be beautiful. But no matter what, whether you were born ugly, I don't believe living things are born ugly, or you were born beautiful, all that matters is that you have a good heart. And that's the truth of it all. Thank you so much for joining me today. I love that story, and I'm so happy I was able to share it with you. And I hope that you're all staying happy, healthy, and safe. Thank you so much.